Welcome into Rick and Bubba University. Excited about another episode. Bubba, today we'll be talking about the book Secret on the Tarmac. Christoper Sign will be our guest, and we'll jump in. We talked about this back when it happened.
Oh, yeah.
Happened, but now we're going to talk to a journalist that has a pretty clear idea of what took place that day based on a source that was there. We'll unpack that with him. But first, one of the things I do want to tell you and encourage you to do, if you have an automobile that has now got outside of the manufacturer's warranty, look, today cars are like computers. I mean, every little thing, it's like computers on wheels. They've got the electronically controlled transmissions, the touchscreen displays, dozens of sensors. And we love this, Bubba. We love technology, but guess what technology is? Expensive to fix if and when it breaks. And if you don't have a warranty, then that's going to be on you. That's why we want to point you to the Car Shield. I'm so thrilled that our older automobiles are under the protection of the Car Shield. Now, these are affordable protection plans that can save you thousands for a covered repair, including computers, GPS, electronics, and more. Now, with Car Shield, you actually are in control. You're behind the wheel of your plan. Car Shield, can customize monthly plans, rates as low as $99 a month, and you get to choose your favorite mechanic. As long as the mechanic is ASE certified, you choose, or the dealership, either one, and then Car Shield works directly with them and takes care of everything. And then, Bubba, while the car is being repaired by Car Shield, dealing directly with the mechanic of your choice, you get a rental car at no extra charge. And even when you're not having issues, you have 24/7 roadside assistance under the Car Shield, again, at no extra charge. They have helped over 1 million customers. So drive with confidence knowing you've got coverage from America's #1 auto protection provider with rates as low as $99 a month. You have nothing to lose. So get covered by Car Shield today. Call them 800-CAR-6000. You do want to mention the code RickBubba or visit carshield.com. Use the code RickBubba to save 10%. That's carshield.com. The code RickBubba. A deductible may apply. All right, so Christoper Sign is here. Welcome, Christoper, to Rick and Bubba University.
I knew I was in the right spot in the parking garage. You know why? Because there's a sedan, a four-door sedan downstairs in the parking garage that was towing a hot dog cart.
That's it.
And I said, this
That's
is the
us.
place.
Wait a minute, that ain't our car. We
Well,
got to find out whose that is.
Nobody's taking ours away. But it's great to be with you, Christoper Sign. Of course, you're the pride of Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas.
Yes, sir.
And you played football at the University of Alabama under Gene Stallings, and then Mike DeBose there at the end, right?
Right.
And you found your way though to Alabama in a strange twist of circumstances that in a way are kind of tied to the book and what took place. So kind of give everybody the brief story of Christoper Sign and how you ended up in our state and kind of the road you've been on.
So recruited out of high school to play football by Gene Stallings. When Coach Stallings comes and sits in your living room, you're pretty much sold at that point, He pulled up in a Cadillac. I'll never forget Cedric Burns, if you're familiar with Cedric Burns. He's always on the sidelines every single game. But Cedric pulls up, Coach Stallings gets out, shakes my hand. Next thing you know, he and my dad are getting in a stance in the living room. They're talking old football. It wasn't even like I was there.
Yeah.
And I'm just watching these two guys talk football. So here I am in the middle of this. I commit to Alabama. I come here and, I'm second string my entire career, and that's just how things go.
Yeah.
Lettered under Coach Stallings and went under Dubose. And upon graduation, I had to figure out what I was going to do. Now, when I was playing at Alabama, I was a theater major. I thought I was going to be a man of the theater and that
You're the only second person I've ever heard, and the other's Rick's son that played football and was a theater.
Really?
Yeah, my son played at Auburn. Sorry.
See, brilliant.
Yeah, and so he is, and he's still acting today. So.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. That's great. I'm jealous. Yeah. So I started leaving practice early to go to theater class, and Coach Stallings called me in his office. Says, "Hey, man, you're changing your major." I said, "Sorry," and he says, "I brought you to Alabama to play football and get an education, not learn how to act. You're changing your major." And I said, "Yes, sir, Coach. What do you want me to do?" "You're going to be a journalist. You ask too many questions." "Yes, sir." And lo and behold, next thing you know,
he coached you up.
Are you saying Gene Stallings changed your major?
He did. He did. I didn't have a choice. I said, "Okay, Coach." I wasn't going to talk back to Coach, and I still don't talk back to Coach, and I speak with him on the phone. So I became a journalist and a journalism major, then graduated from the University of Alabama, and I went for a job interview in Montgomery at one station. I botched it. And boy, did I botch it big time. I didn't know what I was doing. So on the drive back, passed by TV station. It was the ABC affiliate. And I said, I'm going to walk in. Well, I walked in, and a guy named Norman Lumpkin was the news director there. Norman Lumpkin was the first black reporter in the state of Alabama, the first black anchor in the state of Alabama, and the first black news director in Alabama. He was a reporter in the 1960s, and so he was a trailblazer. So he walks out. He says, "You think you want a job here?" And I said, "Yes, sir." So we get to talk, and he says, "Let me see your references." My references were Mike Dubose, Gene Stallings, and Andrew Sorensen, who was the school president at the time. That's all I had. He didn't believe me. So he called Mike Dubose, and Coach Dubose picked up the phone. He took the call, and next thing you know, I got the job. So I detail some of that in the book, and make a long story short, I go from Montgomery to Midland, Odessa, Texas. Then I come back here to ABC 3340. I was in the Tuscaloosa Bureau, and from 2000 to 2005, I'm in working for 3340. Then I head out to Phoenix, and I was in Phoenix for 13 years.
See, I remember you as a reporter here, and then you just disappeared, which a lot of them do. They change jobs.
Absolutely.
And then you just showed back up when a legend anchor had retired.
Yes.
And they had put you, I thought, wow, they went with a young guy. He went out and made a name for himself, and they brought him back.
My friend Dave Baird retired, and he's a good man. Still talk to him. And so my current news director called me, and then I speak with James Spann, and James is like, "Hey, man, you got to come back." And, when I talk to James, I trust James dearly with all my heart. And so here I am.
He's very convincing, too. I mean, when he tells you to take cover, you take cover.
Oh, exactly.
So when that guy tells you to come work, you go to work.
Yeah, it's like James could sell cars. He's like, "That's not an oil leak. That's sweat from the horses under the hood." It's like he could do it all. He's selling ice to an Eskimo.
Oh, no doubt. So Secret on the Tarmac.
Right.
Bubba and I are just casually, doing our little show, and you see all the different TVs in this studio.
Sure.
And we look up, and you're on Fox News, and
I do a double take because we watch your local TV station and hear some, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's the wrong channel. And I go, Rick, Christopher's on the wrong monitor up there. What's he doing?
So we all remember this meeting, and I'm putting quotes around it, with Bill Clinton, and we remember the Tarmac story. And, of course, we're on the air saying this is total hogwash. I mean,
because it was a while back. When was it, 16?
Yeah,
2016, June. 2016.
And when Loretta Lynch, and they say they talk about grandkids, and there was nothing to be concerned about, and we knew the whole thing was going on.
But there was a problem at that time because Hillary was being investigated
by
the FBI for mishandling classified information, are now known as the email server scandal.
Not to mention Benghazi. And the Benghazi scandal is what I was extremely focused on. I wasn't even thinking emails when I got the tip.
Yeah. So what were you doing? How did you get involved in this as a journalist? Just hey, I'm trying to get to the bottom of the story.
So I was a morning anchor in Phoenix, and I was actually leaving for the day. Phone rings. It's a trusted source. I don't identify him. I never will, but we go by the name Jay, is what I call him in the book, and I detail what Jay provided. And when Jay calls, if Jay's the type of guy, if he says the sky is going to be purple tomorrow, I'm going on air with it. He's a guy I trust with my livelihood and my life and anything and everything in between. And he told me, he says, "You're not going to believe this. There was just a meeting between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch on her plane on the tarmac at the executive terminal at Sky Harbor." And I said, "What?" I said, "We didn't even know Bill Clinton's in town." And that's significant because those of us in the media, we're typically notified when a former president is in town. Because, in this case, the Democratic Party, the local party, would want to, kind of thump their chest and say, "We got the former president in town."
Yeah, they want the coverage of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in some cases, there's what's called a temporary flight restriction where our news chopper would not be allowed to fly overhead. None of that took place. Nobody knew Bill Clinton was in town. I said, "Are you sure?" And so I went back into work. And the minute I walked into work, one of my co-anchors said, "Uh-oh." And I popped out an energy drink, popped it, and he says, "Uh-oh, what's going on?" And so I started doing the research. We started checking things out, and he was spot on. And it just so happened Loretta Lynch was about to have a news conference, and we had a reporter assigned to cover that news conference. It was part of her community policing tour. This was her first stop on that, trying to get the public and the police to start working together a little bit better and smooth out some wrinkles there. And next thing you know, she was tipped off that I found out.
Ooh.
And I lay that out in the book as to how she was tipped off. And they start delaying the news conference and delaying it and delaying it and delaying it. And the thing is, what we did, our reporter there, we had our reporter prepared. We decided we're not going to ask Loretta Lynch if the meeting took place. We're going to ask her what was discussed. In an effort,
foregone conclusion. We know you had the meeting.
Exactly. We didn't want to what's called throw a grenade in there, but in this it was just going to be a spear right there saying we know it happened. Tell us what was discussed. And the thing is, they kept delaying it, and that's where it leads us into what's called the talking points memo. And they designed and devised an entire plan around the talking points.
So here we have the Attorney General. Hillary Clinton is under investigation for multiple things.
Right.
And all of a sudden, like you being a theater major, almost like you're now writing, the script for everybody.
Absolutely.
Strangely, we have the FBI come out and say, well, there's some things going on here. It doesn't look good and all this, but we don't think there's anything here that anybody would prosecute anybody over. And
that was James Comey.
James Comey.
Which was very rare to do that.
And then you hear first of all, talk about how rare that is. And then he suddenly lets us know that the very person that Bill Clinton was just, hanging out talking about grandkids, the very person, the Attorney General, will ultimately make the call. And Bill Clinton is meeting with the person that's going to make the call on what's going to happen to Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Now, I don't have to know a whole lot to know that sounds terribly, terribly fishy.
Well, it was a planned meeting. And I detail that in the book, and I explain how it was a planned meeting. And to be clear, this is about journalism, and I'm not going to preach big J and yay journalism, but that's what this is about. It's about facts, and it's then to let everybody decide the conclusion that they have. But what I've laid out here are the discrepancies throughout, how it was planned, how he orchestrated this. What you may not know is Loretta Lynch landed, okay? Bill Clinton was running late. Not just late, but oddly late. We're talking significantly late. His security team didn't know what was going on. So he pulls up to his plane, which is parked in the executive terminal of Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. It is a secure area. There are cameras, there are cops, there are gates. You're not getting in, okay? Nobody like you or I are going to get anywhere near it. Well, he pulls up and he sits in the car. And at that point, Loretta Lynch's private plane is pulling up. It's already landed. It's taxiing into position. It stops. He's in the car. Most of her staff gets off. Now, that's somewhat orchestrated because, a lot of them know security-wise who gets off first, who gets off in the middle, who gets off last. It's all planned and orchestrated. Yes, absolutely, for security reasons. So most of her staff gets off. He gets out of his car. He walks over to Loretta Lynch's plane. And at this point, the vast majority of FBI and Secret Service who are there, because she's traveling with FBI, he's traveling with Secret Service, and then you have local and state police officers, they're wondering, what the heck are we supposed to do? Mm-hmm. There's no protocol on the books.
It's not planned.
No, there's no protocol in the books on how to deal with a former president of the United States meeting with a current Attorney General of the United States.
On a tarmac.
Yes.
Unannounced.
So these men and women in uniform are trying to figure out what to do while they are saying, running in circles. Bill Clinton walks up the air stairs, and the minute he walks up the air stairs and gets on her plane, the FBI agent who is in charge of her security then positions himself right at the entrance of the plane. Mm-hmm. Nobody's allowed on that plane.
They're on there by themselves.
They are now by themselves with Loretta Lynch's husband, who has never been questioned to this day. Loretta Lynch and her husband were about to exit the plane. Her head of security says, "Ma'am, the former president of the United States, Bill Clinton, would like a moment with you." And before she had even a moment to answer, she turns around and he's on board. He's on the plane. So he testified that he was invited on board. He told the Office of Inspector General, who was investigating the entire presidential election, he told the Office of Inspector General he was invited on board. But guess what? Loretta Lynch says he wasn't invited on board. So there's your first and easiest discrepancy right there. Loretta Lynch is about to get off the plane. She has her bag in hand. Her bag is now seated on a chair in the airplane. Bill Clinton grabs the bag. He sets it on the floor. He takes a seat. Now, Bill Clinton, the former president of the United States, is sitting on her plane looking up at Loretta Lynch and her husband. So now, naturally, what are Loretta Lynch and her husband going to do?
Sit down.
They're going to have a seat. Right. And the meeting is underway.
Meanwhile, his wife is being investigated.
Right.
For all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And he's on the plane with the Attorney General, forcing himself on them, basically. Mm-hmm. And he gets his meeting.
Right, for 20 minutes.
And then afterwards, it was told that it was just a happenstance meeting. They talked about grandkids.
And
golf and, all that kind of good stuff.
Now, what you mentioned the talking points, so I suppose you guys asked Loretta Lynch when you finally got the press conference.
Oh, yeah. And
so what was this conversation about?
So she said it was about golf, grandkids, Brexit, nothing of significance is how she laid it out. But she provided a very long answer. And as a journalist, when somebody keeps going and going and going, it's like, because there's a happy medium. There's a no comment, which she knew that she couldn't say, I have no comment on that, because that would be something else. But then laid it out there, and it was orchestrated. I mean, it was like, we were shocked. I was shocked that she acknowledged it, and she just went with it. I was like, wow, man, she owned it and went with it. And then I learned about the talking points memo, because what's happened between now and then, and people have asked me, why now? Why are you releasing this book now?
Right.
Because I have been slowly gathering information over the past couple years. And so a lot of this information hasn't ever come out because I have been gathering and just sitting off on the sidelines, watching it all unfold and waiting for, whether it's people to trip up or for documents to drop. And in one particular case, for a source to drop me the behind closed doors testimony Loretta Lynch provided a House Oversight Committee in December of 2018.
So she was questioned about all this.
She was.
Under oath, privately.
But the problem is, it was with a House Oversight Committee in December of 2018. She was questioned by the Office of Inspector General, who was investigating this, and they never compared the apples to apples here. And that's where you have so many discrepancies, even the timing. She changed the narrative from 20 minutes that she told the Office of Inspector General, and I've reported on as well through my source, Jay, that it was a 20-minute meeting. She told the House Oversight Committee, no, it was more like 10 minutes, maybe even 8 minutes. And then she told the House Oversight Committee this was a meeting about that Bill Clinton flattered her. She also testified that Bill Clinton brought up Eric Holder, that Bill Clinton talked about the job that she's doing at Justice. That was her quote, at Justice.
Well, he's known to be flattering to females, so that's not completely
let's be honest. Bill Clinton is a very bright man. He's no dummy, You don't get in the positions that he's been in for be the president of the United States for being dumb.
Or you don't get out of the things he's been in with being dumb. But anyway, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. But it is funny anytime a female says, Bill Clinton flattered me, we all go, I'm sure he did. Even though your husband was there, he doesn't seem to care. But anyway, that's another point. But that's the first thing I thought of is, all right, so Chris has got this. It's over. Trump won. Hillary did not get it. So why does this matter? It matters because we as Americans have been saying for quite some time, journalism is dead.
Right.
There's no such thing as – there was a time in this country you didn't even know who journalists went into a booth and voted for.
Correct.
But if they would go out and say there are facts here and we will bring down and we will inform the American people if they need to know that somebody is doing something that is outside of what we deem appropriate or legal as your government. But now it seems it's turned into we only go after anything that's politically expedient for the party we support.
Right.
And you're saying here's another example of this, and you're trying to show this more than anything. What I gather from it is, this was a cover up. This was not journalism.
Right. We have to hold the powerful accountable. People rely on journalism, and journalism is not dead. I advocate for local journalism. I do, because I live in this community. I love this community, and I wake up every day in this community. Whereas some of the nationals, if something happens here, they parachute in, they tell a story, and then they leave. Mm-hmm. That's why I advocate for local journalism. And when I was in Phoenix, this was a local story that went national. And it's near and dear to me, and I have continued to follow it. And we have to hold the powerful accountable. I think it's a very exciting time right now to be a journalist because people hold me accountable. And if I'm ever questioned on a story I do, that's okay. It's the journalists who get mad when they're questioned that should raise a red flag, right, in my opinion, because you have to remain objective. And in this case, I'm not taking sides. I am pointing out the discrepancies, the problems, explaining what happened, explaining how it impacted my family, and ultimately what led me right back here to Alabama.
Well, we want to talk about that, what happened after this. But you make a good point, and I thought we had Reese Davis on one of our podcasts not too long ago, and he was talking about sports. Mm-hmm. And we were talking to him about, being a homer for a team or, if you're in the position he's in. Mm-hmm. And he said that, everybody has a bias. The problem is, or what they strive to do, is just be fair in their reporting. They're not even going to deny bias or fandom, but just be. And he said what ESPN wants is for them to be fair in their reporting of the story. Absolutely. And I think the same thing would be in in politics or whatever we cover. But it sometimes it just seems like we have people on one side and we have people on the other, and they're only, like Rick said, going to give you stories that way. We've kind of lost our middle ground.
I agree. We're not allowed to disagree anymore. What happened to me listening to your opinion and saying, okay, I respect your opinion? That's not happening anymore. Good God, that was flushed down the toilet sometime. I don't know why or when that happened, but it has happened. But we have to be able to disagree, but we have to be able to listen to each other. And that's what this book is. It's a listen to what happened and understand what happened in that moment, that you just can't let things go and forget about it. We can't dwell in the past, but we have to understand the past to understand the future.
Learn from it.
In a strange way, I wonder, and I'm not saying this, but I'm just asking, could this be part of it? We clearly have a political correctness that's in our public arena now. Mm-hmm. There's things you say and can't say.
Sure.
And that used to not be that way. I just wonder if it doesn't affect the way that we try to do things because, like you said, I can't disagree or we can't disagree with each other because we don't want to say the wrong thing or we don't want to disagree with some group that has an agenda or whatever.
Right.
So instead of engaging and saying, Chris, you're full of it, I don't believe you, this is what I believe, like we used to,
right,
we go to our little corners where we're safe, and then we say what we want to say.
Yes.
And then so we end up with Team A and Team B as opposed to all of us out in the middle presenting ideas, disagreeing, and then going on to the next story and let people decide.
Like, let's take this story, your book. For example, what Bubba's saying. What's wrong? Whatever happened to all of us, saying this is what I think is best for the country politically? Well, this is what I think is best for the country politically. But taking a story like this, and just sitting down and say, all right, let's look at the facts of this. We've got Comey and his comment in his press conference. That's kind of weird. We've got a former first lady who looks like she's in a lot of trouble. We've got her husband who shows up on the tarmac to talk to the attorney general, who's ultimately going to decide whether his wife's going to be investigated or not. Can we not all drop our political bias and just sit back and say, journalist, will you tell me what you found out's going on here, and then I'll decide as an American whether I think this looks fishy or not? It doesn't mean that I can never vote for my political party again. It never means that I've got to change my political views. What are the facts of this situation? And as a citizen of this country, do I like this kind of stuff and think it's important, or I don't?
Right. One example, the talking points. People need to understand why did Loretta Lynch, why did her entire staff, and to be clear, her staff did their job in protecting her. And also to be clear, Loretta Lynch had no idea this meeting was about to occur. She was surprised, and she did not know, okay? But one simple example of what you're describing, the talking points, and the people who were involved in the talking points. James Comey, the leader of the FBI, he had a copy of the talking points. Right after the meeting happened, right after they found out I had been tipped off, and they started the talking points memo in a series of emails. And I have copies of the emails, but they're all blacked out. There might as well be blank pages, to be honest with you. But I can see who they went to, and James Comey is on that list that was going back and forth, and he received a copy of the talking points. So why devise talking points if it was such, an innocent meeting?
You don't need them.
Right. And these are the types of things that have transpired over the past couple of years that have been, hidden behind closed doors up until now. And that's what I'm trying to reveal in the book, that I did not forget, nor should our country forget, of what took place, and that this is what happened, and you can draw your conclusions.
Are you concerned, first of all, tell us about the impact on your family, and are you concerned that the book's going to bring some of that back? So first of all, tell us what happened.
After I broke the story, I had death threats. They were significant death threats. Had my credit cards hacked. My life was put on hold.
Did you catch grief from your bosses at the station?
No.
They were supportive of your journalistic efforts 100%.
There was not a single bias either way in our newsroom, and I detail that in the book about how proud I was that nobody ever said, don't do the story. They only said, make sure it is spot on right, because you can't put that toothpaste back in.
Right.
And I had the full support. But next thing you know, I had a cop at my house. And these are friends now, these police officers. We would take photos of my boys inside the police car in front of my house. And he'd say, hey, make sure you post that on social media. Therefore, the people who are threatening you can see that, you have security.
We're here, yeah.
Yes. So we had cell phones in each one of their rooms, because a lot of people don't know your old cell phones that you don't use, that are in your junk drawer in the kitchen. You can still power them up and call 911. They still work for 911. So we had those in each rooms. We have code words. We still have code words today that if I say a series of words, my boys know exactly what to do, how to react, where to go, things like that. So the death threats were significant, and my wife and I had to figure out what to do. And amid all of this, I get a call in the newsroom, and at this point I still was taking calls, and it was Coach Stallings. and he says, hey, man, are you okay? And I said, well, Coach, it's a little odd. He says, well, I'm worried about you. And I said, it's an interesting time, Coach. And keep in mind, I was not a big name player. I wasn't, the Sean Alexanders of my era, or, Jay Barkers, any of that kind of stuff. I was no big name player. But here's Coach Stallings calling and checking on a guy who was his backup player his entire career. So anyway, time passes, and now I'm not taking any calls. I have it completely locked down. I'm not talking, even some of my friends, I stopped doing interviews because I was worried about people following me, everything. And, phone rings again. I said, no, I'm not taking calls. I'm not taking calls. And he said, you need to take this. I said, I'm not taking calls. Fine. Person on the other end says, Christoper? I said, yes, with a question mark. I don't know if you know who I am, but I played football at Alabama too. My name is Leroy Jordan. And I was like,
yeah, we know who you are.
Yes, sir, Mr. Jordan. I know exactly who you are.
Right.
And he says, well, if you need anything, I'm here for you. And you come stay at my house in Dallas, and your Alabama family is going to protect you, and we have your back. And it was a super kind gesture from a man I had never met, and it just showed kind of the bond. And this is not anything against Auburn or Georgia or anything. I'm just trying to explain that there's a bond, team bond here. Yeah. And it was amazing. And then amid some of the death threats, one of my closest friends, he's a catfish farmer in West Alabama. And he told one person who threatened me, he says, listen, I'm in Greene County, Alabama. I've got dump trucks and guns. Let me know where you want to meet.
Wow.
That guy didn't respond.
I was about to say, you're crossing the wrong. You got ties to Alabama, then you don't know who you're messing with.
I'm telling you. Yeah. And my friends, my teammates, they came out of the woodwork. They weren't having it. And, I got emotional at the time because, when you're down like that and you don't know who to trust and what's going on, and you have people, you find out who your real friends are. And a lot of my real friends were right here in this state.
Christoper, let me ask you this. When you were getting these threats, and you said some of them you considered serious.
Correct.
Were those people who were just Clinton fans and they thought you were trying to harm the Clinton image? How high up did that go? Do you think any of them were, any of them sicked on you by parties that would be damaged in this book?
Potentially, but most importantly and most significantly, they thought that I was aiming to sway the election, that I was attempting and trying to impact the election. And I said, no, don't be mad at me. Be mad at the people who took part in the meeting, and that's what was not happening.
Right.
The people weren't mad. The people coming after me, they weren't mad about the meeting. They were mad that I exposed it. That's what was so mind-blowing and so unusual for me. But everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a right to think what they want. And I've been criticized. I know you guys have been criticized.
No, never.
And that's okay. I'll accept it. But when they start going after my family, game over. No, that's not cool.
Well, it's just a strange thing because Comey, in one way, hurt Hillary, and in another way, he helped her. And I don't know, it does bring up an interesting thing when you're in a political election and you have someone who is accused of a criminal activity, how you investigate them, how you handle it. I mean, if he sits on information, he's obviously helping her out. If he goes public with information, it looks like he's hurting her on that. It's hard just to do your job and not influence. I mean, it really does get complicated, doesn't it?
And what if my source Jay didn't tip me off? We wouldn't know.
Right.
Would any of the law enforcement had filed a report, for lack of a better term, saying that this happened? I don't know. But nobody would have known. James Comey, wouldn't have known. James Comey said that the reason he held that news conference was that he felt he had to get out in front of the situation because of the Tarmac meeting, and he thought that the image of the Tarmac meeting was tarnishing the investigation. And that was the tipping point that led him to have that news conference. He said that.
And I think that's a fair assessment.
Probably so.
Yeah.
And
except for the fact that then you're going to give power to the person who had the meeting to make the decision. It
was kind of a, she was saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, Christopher, I'm trying to remember, I think she come out publicly and said, I'm going to go with whatever the FBI recommends.
Correct. She was going to go with the recommendation.
And then he comes out and says, we're not going to prosecute this because there's not enough evidence to get a jury to go along with us. But still, that was strange. The FBI usually reports to the Department of Justice.
Correct.
Then they make the announcement. They're like the district attorney on the local level. They make the decision whether to prosecute or not the head police officer who's gathering information.
And the White House was briefed, by the way, on all of these steps from the Tarmac meeting. And my sources tell me that President Obama did not think that the Tarmac meeting was something that they needed to get involved with at the time. And once that roller coaster started going downhill and started gaining more speed and more momentum, he then was briefed on it. And I don't know if he was handed the talking points, to make sure everybody was on the same page and to make sure they didn't, go off script here, or if he was verbally briefed on the talking points. But I know that he was briefed in some form or fashion, and ultimately President Obama decided to remain back on this and let it take its own course.
Well, I know when Comey said they wasn't going to investigate, a lot of people on the right were going, well, sure, this is a whitewash deal. Then he turns around, 2 weeks later?
Yeah, about
and
2
says,
weeks.
We're opening it back up.
Yes.
And then everybody on the left went nuts.
Yeah, what was that all about?
I don't know if it was buyer's remorse or what.
I know.
I don't know, because it's for me looking at it, I'm not sure which way to look at it for James Comey, because sorting through fact and fiction, the fact is he had the talking points, and fact is he knew the meeting took place. And the other fact is in his book, he talks about it was, wide open and there was no impropriety because it was this big public tarmac, and I detail that specifically in the book. Whereas, no, he's completely wrong. This is a secure area of the airport.
That part is important in the book. You need to that again, like you do as a journalist. Do I see something here that I know for a fact was not truthful? Yes.
Exactly.
He says this was open and public, but I know that isn't correct because it's not.
Correct.
So then that's the first time you do a little flag says, okay, well, that's not true. I know that's not true. Because you're saying
why, then you have to ask the question, why did they say that?
Why did they say that?
Did they have bad information, or are they trying to
Could have
throw
been
us off the trail. So
could have been mistaken. I mean, certainly that's a possibility.
He may have been briefed, and it was bad information. But I literally cite word for word what he wrote in his book, an entire paragraph that is it's just not correct.
Christopher, let me ask you this now, because it's tying into what we're seeing now. We talked about this a little bit earlier. The Justice Department is under the executive branch, and that would be the president. But they are the top law officer in the country. But how do you handle that when they're investigating the president? It gets very complicated. And some people think that the Department of Justice should be absolutely independent of the president. Some people don't think that's a big deal. And we've seen it both ways in different administrations. I mean, how do we sort that out? And I guess what I'm trying to say, Eric Holder was quoted as, "I'm in Obama's corner," when they were trying to get things done. You've heard Barr being criticized now because it looks like he's doing what the president wants done. How do we sort all that out?
It's a sticky and it is a tangled web. I'll give you the example as it relates to the book, because that's, the Tarmac meeting.
Right, and that's kind
of my expertise, because in this situation, what if Loretta Lynch brought in a special prosecutor or a special investigator? So do you get somebody like a Mueller, Robert Mueller, and the next thing you know, people are going to say, he's biased. And then, or do you get somebody like John Smith from wherever? No matter who you get, there's always going to be a side that says that they are not objective, they're not impartial. And that is
because nobody is completely.
Not at that level, because there's always alliances. You either have an alliance with the White House, you have an alliance with a potential future president because you're trying to set yourself up for a future job.
Right.
And that is a situation that I think that we as a society actually should look at. Who is investigating who, and who is biased and who's not, and who's objective and who's subjective. It is a mess, and it needs to be addressed. I think that that's a great point, because in this situation, they probably could have brought in a special prosecutor or a special investigator, but who? I don't know.
If they're a Democrat, you're playing home team. If they're a Republican, they're out to get you anyway. So how do you ever have fairness in that?
And I don't know if you bring in a Supreme Court justice to do that, but then again,
who appointed them?
Who appointed them? It is a very...
You never can get away from that. Right. Where are your roots from, and who are your friends?
But I know what we are all hoping, because if just what you're trying to do here with the book, the truth doesn't have a political slant.
No.
The truth is the truth. It's unbiased. It doesn't... But the problem is now we've gotten to the point that says, well, no, truth is relative. But it's really not.
Nope.
There really is truth about your book. There is the truth on what took place on that tarmac. And I mean, and it doesn't have a political bias. It's just the truth.
Right, and even in the book, I lay out within one of the chapters discrepancy 1, 2, 3, 4, and I put it as plain and as simple as possible without adding any of my thoughts, feelings, concerns, and it's literally discrepancy 4, the time change. That's just one of the examples I put in here. And that time change is when it was 20 minutes and then all of a sudden Loretta Lynch says, no, it was 10, maybe even 8. And the golf conversation.
That was a lot to cover in 8 minutes. Add a little flattery time in there.
I love that you say that. Think about this. If it's 8 minutes, golf, grandkids, Brexit, West Virginia coal, travels to China, Pulse nightclub shooting, Eric Holder, job flattery, and job at justice. That's 9 topics in 8 minutes. And for easy math, let's say 9 topics in 10 minutes. For Loretta Lynch, who was talking to Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton meeting Loretta Lynch's husband for the first time. If you and I meet for the first time, are we going to cover 8 topics in 10 minutes?
No. Brexit is going to take more than 8 minutes.
Exactly.
Grandkids will take more than 8 minutes.
So that's the timing.
Right. Or 10 minutes if you want to give her the 10 minutes.
And I lay it out there, and it's so important for my children to know, people's children to know, our society to understand what took place here, because we cannot have a repeat. We can't allow it to happen, and people need to know, and people need to feel comfortable in being a whistleblower and being a tipster and tipping off journalists like myself or somebody that you trust to make sure that the powerful are held accountable. One thing in here, I titled the discrepancy, Golf is Rough. The topic of golf is rough because guess what? It was 107 degrees in Phoenix at the end of June, and a heart patient is not playing golf, my friend. My dad died of a heart attack, and I'm telling you right now, a heart patient is not playing golf in Phoenix in 107-degree temperatures, and Bill Clinton did not play golf on that trip, while Loretta Lynch told the Inspector General that he did play golf.
Well, it is important to look at this. Are you concerned they're going to get upset with you again?
I don't know. It makes me feel comfortable that I'm back surrounded by my former teammates and good people around me that understand that I'm not trying to sway anybody's opinion. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to tell the story and show the facts. And I don't know. We're on alert. My family is on alert.
Sure,
law enforcement is notified.
Have you ever seen the list of people that tried to make the Clintons look bad?
No.
You don't want to.
It's not a good record.
I don't want to know.
Just kind of stare at that. Yeah.
I think we had another one last week.
You might want to ask Jay about it.
Yeah. But I'm just trying to have fun and be a dad, and
that's right.
And I've been in a lot of green rooms lately, and I got to tell you, I've never been in a green room like yours, where I walk in and there's this big Texas cinnamon roll.
There you go.
And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. See, but you're not going to get that in New York. You're not going to get the big Texas cinnamon roll offered to you in a green room in New York. You get that right here.
This is your home now.
Yes.
Where we are. Yeah, what about the fact that it bothered you that you couldn't get really? I mean, we have this just gargantuan media everywhere, 24/7, and you couldn't. How do you have all this information and no one else would cover it?
Boy, I was asked that actually on Fox and Friends when I did that interview in New York, and they said, "How come other members of the media didn't pick up on this?" And I was honest. I don't have an answer. Right. It is still kind of bizarre to me that that nobody picked up on it so quickly. It's funny. I actually had a radio station here in Birmingham that called me, wanted me to do an interview, and that was one of the first ones that requested an interview. And it wasn't uncommon for some of the other journalists, from some of the Washington newspapers and things like that, calling, and they were fact checking their own facts.
Right.
Which is, I don't mind that at all. And some journalists will do that. They'll call and say, "Hey, you broke the story. Hey, is this aligning with what you were told?" And they were just checking on their own stuff. And I did that. And then one of them turned out, in my opinion, to be a fake journalist that was trying to find out who my source was.
What you knew, yeah.
And that was really...
And where it came from.
And that was I'll never forget. It was about, I was driving to work at 1:00 in the morning because I was morning show anchor, and it dawned on me what had just happened. And that is, I spoke to a guy who said he was a journalist for a well-known newspaper, and he was chronicling everything. And he was planning on writing a book just on various presidents and this, that, and the other. And he wanted to go through everything. I went through everything with him from the very beginning, how it transpired. At the end of the conversation, the guy says, "Well, so when you were talking to your source, did you hear like a police radio in the background or anything?" And I said, "No," and then it dawned on me, oh my God, this person is trying to find out and thinks that my source was a cop. And I thought, I have just been duped talking to this person because they have just been listening to every single word I said, trying to figure out who the source is. And that's what a lot of this became, that people, again, they were angry at me, trying to find out the source rather than the
truth.
Christoper, we're about out of time even for the podcast, but let me ask you this. Have you had other journalists look at your book and go, you have a fact wrong here, or be critical of your investigating in this?
Before I put it out, I had several people look at it, and journalistically, they were just glad that I sourced everything. And I lay it out point by point, just so that you can understand where it came from. And so every single source I say, from the Office of Inspector General, or this is from the House Committee. Therefore, it is completely out in the open, and yeah. But it's been a ride, man. It's been a ride, and
well, you did a good job on it.
I appreciate that, and I'm just glad to be back here. Like I said, we were house hunting in New York at the time when Mama called, and here I am. And me.
Well,
and
you've
my
done a
wife
great job. We're glad to have you back.
Well, secret on the tarmac, if for no other reason, get it and document this thing in history so you see, the inconsistencies. It's important for us to know that, especially going forward as an American public. Secret on the Tarmac by Christoper Sign. You can go to ChristopherSign.com, obviously, and you can find out all the information about the book. And the book's also available on Amazon or wherever you get books.
Yes, sir.
So
yes,
thanks
sir.
for taking.
We're gonna have you back, Christopher, and talk about some other topics.
I know we can talk about fun stuff. We can talk football and family and cooking and grilling and
there's some other news stories out there.
Stuff we'll talk
I'd like
about.
to get your insight on.
Yeah, so. we can have some fun.
Thanks for being with us.
We got to smile more. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Thanks for you joining us again today on another edition of Rick and Bubba University.